Okay, hello subscribers, past and present. I do this regularly. As my parents grow older, increasingly, I'm looking after them. Just heading out to the supermarket just now, just doing the messages. But I want to talk about something, and I actually wrote about this. I think I even made a YouTube video about this about 3 years ago. I want to talk about the difficulty of launching your own business. It's very well intentioned because, let's face it, a lot of jobs and careers these days really do suck. And if you're a frontline worker, well, basically you're at the mercy of managers, and the managers, most of them will be at the mercy of basically the organization, the market, the customers, the clients, etc. I want to just say a few things just straight off the bat. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Just like management is not for everybody. Most people don't have what it takes to be a manager. Most people are not cut out to be leaders and visionaries. Now, I am not saying don't ever consider becoming an entrepreneur. What I'm saying is we've got to be realistic, because yes, I mean, and when I say entrepreneur, I don't necessarily mean you have to establish a private limited company and become the CEO and have an executive boardroom and have 100 employees. I mean, you're never going to get from just launching a business to running a big, huge company just like that. Very, very, very few people who launch businesses ever reach that stage. Now, I've been around this block a few times in the past. I want to talk about two things. Way back in the years 2009 to 2012, there were a group of us, mostly students and a few lecturers and my father and myself, and this was during the depths of the post-2008 financial crash, the big economic recession. And, we had high unemployment, high youth unemployment. Basically, most employers just wouldn't hire at all. It was a terrible time. And it was especially a terrible time for students and graduates and school leavers. And the word on the street, and even in the universities, was don't bother looking for a job. Don't bother chasing the graduate milk round. Launch your own business. Just launch your own startup. Do something yourself. We would now probably call it side hustling, but side hustling is more, a kind of second income, something you do by yourself when you finish work. You work a day job and then you come back home and you do a side hustle. Now, I've been there. When I worked my previous cleaning job from summer 2021 to early 2023, I was still doing a bit of proofreading on the side, and there were some good clients. I even had some well-paid assignments, but the thing is, we've got to be realistic when it comes to entrepreneurship. Number one, if you want to become an entrepreneur, if you want to launch your own business, well, you better have some people. You better find a gap in the market. And I would say don't even think about formally launching a business until basically you've already got clients knocking on the door, until you've got that better mousetrap and people are beating a path to your door. Now, I look back upon my stints at being self-employed last decade up until early this decade, and I was very, very fortunate because, I was clinging on to a dead-end, 0 hours job in Paisley up until early 2014. In fact, almost to this very day. It was 23rd of April 2014. That was when I formally took redundancy from a job I'd clung on to in Paisley for years. And I ended up long-term unemployed, going nowhere, had almost no money in the bank. I was signing on at the job centre, and it all began, frankly, when, out of sheer desperation, I just pulled everything off the shelves in my bedroom. I didn't start out doing freelance editing and proofreading. I started out basically flogging my possessions on eBay and Amazon. And, I made a reasonable amount of money from that. Certainly enough to keep, paying the rent to my parents. I've been living with my parents basically my whole adult life, and I'm extremely fortunate, by the way, because a lot of people don't have that luxury. A lot of adults, some of my co-workers especially, they kind of resent me because they come from broken families, they come from council estates and places, and they've not had that moral, if not financial support throughout their lives. A lot of people, a lot of adults, they don't have a loving family home to come back to. They don't have loving parents, they don't even have both parents or even one parent. So working a frontline job especially, and even a lot of white-collar jobs, increasingly just don't pay the bills. So I am not for one split second heaping scorn on anyone who says, come on, working a day job ain't enough, being an employee sucks, it's rubbish, you're better off going self-employed. I understand why a lot of people say that, but I have to say that unless you really do have a valuable skill set and you've identified and you're occupying a market gap, and I would say unless you already have interested clients, potential or actual clients knocking on your door who are willing to pay you money to do stuff, I would say don't even think about launching a business formally. You've got to start from scratch. You've got to build up, because yes, businesses, if you're very good at what you're doing, if you're hardworking, industrious, yes, your business may grow organically, but you're not going to go from just working a few hours and making a bit of money on the side to running a fully fledged business employing hundreds of staff. You're not going to go from there to there in a year or even a decade. It takes a very, very long time, and that's only if you're in the right place, in the right part of the market. If you've targeted the right market segment. Back in late 2014, early 2015, I was flogging my possessions from my bedroom, literally from my bedroom, and I was selling them on Amazon, eBay. I was selling DVD box sets. I was selling computer peripherals and equipment and video games. I was selling books, CDs, and there was a demand for these things back then. But that's 11 years ago, sorry. That was a window which pretty much fizzled out by about 2016, 2017. For a while, I was going around charity shops and secondhand shops, finding rare DVD box sets and things like that. And back in late 2014, 2015, I was making reasonable money selling these things and sending them through the post. But that market pretty much died, certainly by the year 2017. Back in 2015, I pushed the boat out. On my brother's advice, I decided to set up an account on Gumtree, and I advertised myself as a freelance academic proofreader. And I found a few clients. But that was 2015. And within 2 or 3 years, whenever I was advertising on Gumtree, I was getting next to no responses at all. But fortunately, in 2016, I'd managed to get in contact with first one and then another Chinese client who was in contact with hundreds and hundreds of students and postgraduates. And so I managed to secure a more stable pipeline of regular editing work, assignments coming my way. Now, the thing is, that's just my experience. This is just purely anecdotal. But I have to say that throughout the whole time, all the years in which I was doing proofreading, it was very precarious, and more importantly, it was a cottage industry, because I was having to chisel my way, one document at a time. If I was proofreading over 1,000 words per hour, I was doing well. And there's no shortcuts. And I think what a lot of entrepreneurs discover is they've basically embarked upon what is nothing more than just a cottage industry. They can't actually expand. They can't multiply what it is they're doing. Not unless they start hiring staff, and then somebody has to do the marketing, somebody has to try and target more clients and customers. But the thing is, then you begin to enter another obstacle, which is division of labor. Because if your business is expanding and your client base is building up, over time you begin to realize that you can't actually do the work. You can't serve the customer and run the business all at the same time. Eventually it gets too much. Now, I'm not rubbishing, I'm not poo-pooing entrepreneurship. I'm just saying you've got to watch out. One of my father's friends, she launched a domestic cleaning business up in Argyllshire. And very, very quickly she realised she couldn't just go personally driving from house to house to house to house all by herself. She had to start hiring people. She had to start employing staff. And when you start employing staff, that's when the proverbial starts to hit the fan. Certainly here in Britain, you have to start dealing with the taxman, with the HMRC. And things begin to get very dicey. In this country, if you think that frontline workers are taxed heavily, good grief, businesses, they are taxed to the death. The taxation in this country really is high. And that's another thing. This idea that you can just jet off to Dubai and just turn your online side hustle into a fabulous online business. Well, the thing is, what are you actually doing online? Are you coding? Are you doing, sort of drop shipping, retail, stuff like that? The thing is, a lot of business is part analog, is terrestrial, if you know what I mean. In many fields, if you decide to launch a business, you've got to operate geographically where you're based. Now, I was very lucky doing my freelance proofreading in that, a lot of the agents' clients weren't necessarily based in this country. And I was just working on the computer. I was editing documents and just emailing stuff back and forth. But even then, that line of work, it had its limits. And I just couldn't expand beyond a certain point. I tried briefly in early 2017, teamed up with two other people whom I took on as, a couple of other freelance editors. But the thing was, the work itself, the pipeline fluctuated, it oscillated. We were working for one client at that time, and the work just varied enormously. I still tried promoting myself on LinkedIn and Gumtree, tried even, using other social media channels, but I was getting absolutely nowhere. And that's another thing. If you really want to launch a business, if you want to do, or even just a side hustle, well, you got to know how to market yourself. There's things like word of mouth. Word of mouth, I think, even after all these years, after everything is said and done, word of mouth is still by far the best. This friend of my father's who's running this cleaning business, she lives in a sort of peripheral region here in Scotland, very small towns and villages, and she interfaces with people directly, and word gets around. She hands out her business cards. She's online, she's on social media. She drives a small van, with the company details and with a QR code and everything on it. It's this sort of striking a balance between online and terrestrial, analog. The thing is, what I get frustrated about and why I'm making this video is that you get all these people saying, oh, you should launch your own business. Oh, you should do your own startup. You should do your side hustle. And they never actually explain to you exactly how you go about it. It's never simple. And in most cases, it'll end probably in failure. It's probably still the case. And I remember reading about this 15 years ago, when a whole group of us in Paisley, we were trying to launch a small cluster of startups. At least 4 out of 5 new start businesses fail, certainly within the first couple of years. And I think one of the important reasons why most new start businesses fail is because the entrepreneurs, the side hustlers, they're hoping to suddenly, make it big. They're hoping to basically move into an office, move into a premises and start hiring staff and, increasing revenue and having several thousand customers and revenue hitting millions per year within the next couple of years. And that's just impossible. That's almost impossible unless you really absolutely do strike it lucky. And when it comes to IT, when it comes to just doing anything online, e-commerce and stuff like that, the world is changing so rapidly. The world of IT never sleeps. I'm working as a cleaner in a large industrial unit with hundreds and hundreds of warehouse and office staff, and they're using all manner of software packages, and I don't recognize half of them. And, Microsoft Office has evolved in leaps and bounds. I've not actually used Microsoft Office properly for about 5 years now. I would have to do a lot of catching up if I was to go back to that. Now, I'm not saying this, I'm not producing this video to discourage you from having a side hustle. But the thing is, if you're trying to do a side hustle or launch your own business out of sheer financial necessity just because your day job's not paying the bills, be careful. Don't be too rash, because one of the worst things you can do when trying to launch a business is spend a fortune and just go out of your way to try and advertise and market your business when you don't even have any clients and customers yet. And you don't really know, you don't really have the premises, you don't have the facilities, the resources, or even the staffing. There's so many business sectors, there's so many fields where you need to have a lot of capital, and I would even say you need to have a lot of investment. You need to have friends in high places who are prepared to lend you money before you properly, formally launch a business. I was very lucky that I managed to flog my stuff on eBay and Amazon all these years ago. I mean, I was so blessed that I managed to survive doing freelance proofreading all these years, but I have to say that I never made a huge amount of money in either case. And it was always just going to be a kind of cottage industry. There wasn't really much scope for scalability, let's just say. The problem with editing, and this is the case with a lot of trades, you have to edit one document at a time, and it takes as long as it takes. You can't just magically edit 12 documents at the same time. I mean, we're not talking about the Industrial Revolution when they invented various combustion engines, and they invented various things like the spinning jenny, where they could just multiply processes. And instead of churning out, let's say a ton of wool per, 15 minutes, they could churn out 100 tons. They ran all these machines which churned out hundreds and hundreds at the same time. And the grave danger of going into your own thing, of trying to launch a business or side hustling especially, is that, if it's deliveries, if it's just coding and stuff like that, is that each and every assignment takes as long as it takes, and you've got to start and go through with it and finish that assignment before you can start the next. Unless you've got a team of people working beside you, processing them all at the same time. But then again, before you can get to that stage, you've got to build up the customer base. You've got to root yourself in the market. There's no point taking on staff unless the money's there, the customers are there, waiting and waiting. It's not an easy process, and it takes a very, very long time. And if you're planning to launch a business and go into side hustling and build up from there because you're broke, because your day job sucks or something, that's not a good enough reason. You've got to be passionate about that business. You've got to love every minute of it. I'll be absolutely honest with you. There were moments when I really hated being a proofreader. There were times when I was tearing my hair out and it was driving me mad. It was a stopgap. It enabled me to survive and pay the rent during the many years when I couldn't find a proper job. But it wasn't a permanent solution, and there was no scope really for turning it into a proper business. At the very, very best, potentially, I could have just become another agent communicating with students and other clients and just sending files onto other proofreaders or something, but I didn't need to do that because I was already in contact with agents. Okay, I don't know if any of this makes sense, and a lot of what I've said only applies to myself. It's just purely anecdotal, it's purely my own experience, my own opinions, but basically what I'm trying to say is, if you're struggling financially and if your job is if you have absolutely no job satisfaction and your job just ain't paying the bills, unless you are already doing something on the side, and unless you really truly enjoy doing something on the side, doing your side hustle and making money, and you've got a good number of clients and customers who are already wanting you to do that sort of thing, and unless you absolutely know for certain that there is scope for expanding that work. It's the old saying, you leave a 40-hour-a-week job to work 80 hours a week running a business. The toughest thing about running a business proper is you got to make yourself visible, and that is by far the hardest thing of all, trying to keep yourself visible in the market. And, the two agents for whom I worked when I was a proofreader, they did all that heavy lifting for me. They were the marketers, and I was the sort of the cottage industry artisan. So if you really want to become an entrepreneur, launch a business, if you want to expand your side hustling, if you've started it already, do your homework. Okay, I've not really taught you very much in this video. There are plenty of books, there's plenty of websites and resources out there advising you on how to get started and how to really properly cultivate and build up your business organically. Because I certainly don't have the answers. And I have to say that I'm in a much happier place now, working in a full-time job. Although I know I'll probably not hold that job forever. Just something to think about.